Well, guys, how about that for a game? England versus the All Blacks, 25 all. I did not think I was going to be saying that before the game. I did not think I was going to be saying that at about 70 minutes into this game. What an incredible turnaround right at the end. So much to go over in this game. If you've not seen these reviews before, what we do is we go over the events of the first half, some scores, some highlights, some thoughts, and some stats. And then afterwards, we'll do the same to work out how we got to that full-time result of a draw. Now, these teams not played each other for a long time. The last time I remember watching this, is like a big thing was going on at that World Cup where England managed to come away with a win, and there was a lot to prove here for New Zealand, and they came out of the blocks in this first half. Real intent. We saw it straight from the off. I mean, the first 10 minutes is almost entirely just New Zealand doing things. We had quite an open game. Both teams were sort of taking in turns for the first 2-3 minutes to sort of have charge of being in attack, but New Zealand felt really in control right until we got the first try of the game, coming in from Dalton Papali'i with just a fantastic interception sort of out of nowhere off the back of an England line-out. They've obviously identified this in training, the way England were going to be doing it. A bit too much room between Port Vale and the centres, and the ball thrown out wide. Papali'i picks up the ball, runs a nice 40-metre line to go over for the try, converted by Barrett, and then it was only 5 minutes later until we got to see the next try of the game. New Zealand penalty out the scrum. Alice Genge was hinging. Maybe a bit of a tight call, but, you know, fair enough. You've got to go with the flow of the game. They go to the corner rather than going for the three. Big call here. I did think this was going to be a game where we saw a lot of 3 points. It didn't really end up going that way at all. They went for the big driving maul, and who else but Cody Taylor at the back of that maul, driving over the line for his try. So 2 tries in 10 minutes. This is exactly what we got to see in Scotland. New Zealand with that massive, big advantage, the 14-0 head start. And of course, by the time we get to that final result, sort of similarly going the way of the Scotland game with how much the team gets to come back towards the end. England didn't actually get into the New Zealand 22 until about the 13th minute, where they had their first visit. Now, this was a bit of a key theme in the game. New Zealand managing to defend their own try line extremely well. Well, there was numerous times throughout the game England got all the way into the 22, spent great deals of time there, went through phases right on the try line, but New Zealand just able to hold up. Now, one of these first examples that came up here was in this 13th minute. England actually had a penalty in the New Zealand half. They're 14-0 down at this point. I thought they're going to take a 3 and they'll just try and chip away that scoreboard a little bit. They didn't go for it. They went for the kick at the corner. They went for the driving maul, and New Zealand managed to hold out and got the turnover and exit cleanly. Now, across the rest of this first half, there's a few more instances of this where England had the chance to go for the points and really backed themselves with getting a try, but not scoring a try at all in this first half. A real sort of letdown for them. The team that also came closest to scoring a try was probably New Zealand. Ioane got himself over the try line to dot that one down. There was a huge turnover by Ardi Sarver. Who else? I feel like I say his name every single week for a brilliant turnover. Managing to get the tackle on Port Vale, knocking the ball out of his hands. Ball goes wild. New Zealand managed to spread it wide, and Ioane scores under the post. Now, this one was disallowed due to an earlier ruck that had gone on, where Ioane himself actually was done for a neck roll. I'm not sure about these rules. I understand, you know, player safety and stuff. I don't think it was so much of a neck roll for me. I definitely feel like whoever was over the ruck sort of had his head very far over. I don't really know what else you grab at that point. He just sort of got in a headlock and dragged him away. I don't really think he rolled him. I don't think there's any chance of doing damage to the neck. I just think he sort of dragged him to the side. But those are the letters of the law. So try disallowed. Could have been an even further extended lead for New Zealand there. Now, 20 minutes onwards for a little bit. England got back on the front foot. They went on the attack. They got right up to the try line again. But New Zealand managed to steal it once again. There's just so many players in that New Zealand line that are just so good in the breakdown zone. England did eventually get some points on the board. That penalty coming from foul, that was at the scrum. New Zealand got caught for collapsing that one. So they pulled it back to 14-3 through the boot of foul. Now, unfortunately, we did lose the clock at this point. Or at least we did in the UK with Amazon coverage. I'm not sure if anyone based in New Zealand watching this, maybe watching it through a different provider. Yeah, we had no clock, so I have no idea in terms of what times things happen. I'll have to try my best here. So for the rest of the half, let's put it that way, we had some really big scrum battles, some big breakdowns there. Both teams sort of taking turns at different points. Depending on the put-in, it seemed to be the way the scrum was going. There was one real devastating scrum where New Zealand literally just ran through England's scrum. Wasn't sure what went on there. New Zealand had a superb scrum. I would say overall in the first half, the New Zealand set play was looking slightly better, but if England had the put-in, they were definitely getting the ball in and out, weren't trying to hold it in there for too long. Both teams took turns in attack, but New Zealand really making more meters and making more impact on those visits to the 22. And then New Zealand were the ones to have the final attack of this first half. It looked like a try was coming, to be fair. It looked like it was really building up to it. They were right on England's try line. They went for a real quick pass out the ruck, which I don't think Geordie Barrett was expecting. Bounced off his chest, went forward, got the knock on. They were playing the penalty advantage. They went back for a no-arms tackle that was slightly earlier. So Geordie Barrett took the 3 points, and that's how he got to our 17-3 scoreline. In terms of halftime notes then, just a couple of things I wrote down here. I said England turned down at least 4 chances towards the post across that half. Now, you think about 12 points. What that matters in terms of a scoreboard like this. Add 12 points onto England there. 17-15. That's a far more contestable level to be at when you go into the second half. And in terms of the final result, you see how much more impact that made. Sometimes backing your own team to get over for like a driving maul, if you're not managing it 3-4 times, maybe going for the post would have been the right idea there. The New Zealand set piece was looking slightly stronger. In terms of actual stats and stuff, both teams at the set piece were both 100% in scrums and 100% in lineouts. Some of them looked a little bit wobbly and what have you, but any penalties won was normally on the other person's one. We did have one lineout which didn't actually get thrown in. It was done for time wasting. It doesn't technically count as a loss in rugby stats. So, but both teams on 100% there, but it felt like New Zealand was stronger in the set piece. And then finally, the crossfield kicking tactic that New Zealand brought to this game, working really well, making the England defence stay as far wide as possible. We saw this throughout the game. So many kicking threats in Geordie, Bowden and Mo'unga to be able to get it over to the different sides. Crossfield kicking was actually really on point as well. Normally, we get to see a couple that might get overshot or undershot. Really to the hands. Some really good kicks in this game, but were really putting the England defence under pressure. On to the second half then, and it was England who scored first in this second half. A penalty going over from Marcus Smith. Now, Farrell did pick up a bit of a knock towards the end of that first half to his ankle, which surprisingly stayed on for the entire game, to be honest. Did manage to hold out, but it was Smith took over the kicking duties at that point. This was a jackal penalty straight away from the kickoff, which Marcus Smith then managed to convert to bring them back into within 9 points at 17-6. England have the run of the game for the first 5 minutes. England on another huge attack right up to that New Zealand try line again. They went through 12 phases and eventually sort of sacked themselves out. A sealing off penalty here, going in, just handing that possession back over, just discipline. We see it a lot, teams so desperate to get over that try line, just sealing off over the top. There's a new rule now about latching onto your player. You can't do it. It should have been done a little bit better. The first try actually came from New Zealand. I would say a lot of the run of the play in the second half actually coming from England. This one was against a bit the run of play here. New Zealand managed to get the turnover. Who else was involved there? Adi Sarvea was probably in there as well. They managed to get the turnover and the crossfield kick applied again. England already on the tack. They're slightly misshapen for defending. Gets it out to Caleb Clark. Does a nice little switch pass behind him. Ioane takes it round the outside and runs just a solid 80 metres for a try. Exquisite try from him. Conversion was missed by Barrett. You don't think it's too bad at this point. They're 22 points to 6 up, but a final scoreboard, man, if you miss kicks coming big in this one. Towards the sort of 60-minute marker then, England did replace their front row. The scrummaging wasn't quite going their way. Now, we've talked about in the past few weeks, England's scrummaging. When the front row's been swapped out, I feel like it's got worse. This one again, the front row came on and the first scrum they were involved at just collapsed immediately under the pressure from New Zealand. The actual players this week, though, making much more of an impact on the general game, but the set piece didn't necessarily improve that much for me. England made another attack, went on a big break through Johnny May this time. Actually had a relatively good game in terms of hands on the ball, making some good meters himself. Managed to find a really nice line, went on the attack, did get tackled, and then a jackal penalty came in from Talia and just shut that down. It just was coming across that New Zealand were just able at pretty much every breakdown to make a real nuisance of themselves. They were getting the jackal penalties, they were getting the turnovers. England just not cleaning out as cleanly as they want to. Towards the 70-minute marker, England got their own penalty, New Zealand not rolling away. They kicked a corner again at this point, and the scoreline is still not favourable. You understand why they're going for these tries. They're 16 points down. You feel like they've got to score tries to get back into it. They've had a number of visits now to the 22, not coming away with anything. So got to go for it. There was a New Zealand penalty at this line out for England, jumping across. Maro Toje being thrown across by his lifters, gave New Zealand that easy exit, and then from that penalty, at the next line out, There was another one for England side entry at the Mall. Just compound issues. England have experienced this, especially over this autumn series, just making these silly mistakes not needed. And immediately New Zealand have gained 60 metres back up the field. And in terms of just not making the most of the chances that you have, we had a stat around that 70-minute marker. In terms of visits to the 22 at this point, both teams are on 8. It's very equal, could be going either way. But the points per visit to the 22, England are on 0.4, New Zealand are on 2.8. So every time they're getting into that 22, they're leaving with basically 3. And that's a real big difference up to this point. We're only 10 minutes from the end, and that's a key issue. Yet the time spent in the 22, 5 minutes 41 to England compared to 3.5 minutes for New Zealand. So 2 minutes longer of live play in New Zealand's 22, but not converting it into the points. Now, 70 to 80 minutes is where this game goes off the rails a little bit. Jordie Barrett got himself a nice little drop goal. We don't see him enough in international rugby. Nice to see there. And saving the game by the end of this, if that's the way that it went. I mean, you've got to take those opportunities. That's a good 3 for him to take there. England went on a big break shortly after this drop goal, though. Marcus Smith making a nice little break, having to make the New Zealand defence panic. Did get tackled just a few metres before the try line, where it was just sort of held on to by Barrett for too long. Illegally stopped. England went for the pick and go and went over for a TMO review try. Now, Beauden Barrett here got a yellow card. The commentators did say it was Jordie Barrett. I had to swap that right at the end. I feel this was both correct and harsh at the same time. I feel like it definitely felt to me on the yellow card issue that Ben Youngs actually came over and purposefully stepped over Barrett, stopping him from being able to escape. But before that, I also think Barrett maybe took his time. I think he took his time to get out of the way. I think he knew what he was doing. So I think the yellow card, probably a correct call, but not for the way the ref saw it, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, so we go back for the TMO decision, and they did decide it was a try. So Will Stewart getting his try on from the bench, not been on for a crazy amount of time, but managed to get his try. Conversion was missed by Marcus Smith on the kicking duty, not up to that 100% for Marcus Smith still, unfortunately. But 2 minutes later, Freddie Stewart goes over for a fantastic try. Probably the best play of the game we've seen from England so far. Basically, the ball shifting through, I think, nearly every member of the team, to be fair. They went right to left, back to right, back to left. They went through 3 or 4 different types of rucks. But the players hitting the correct lines where you want to be. Those subs have come on. They made an impact into the game. And England are finding the gaps now in that New Zealand defence. Big carry meters from a number of players. They managed to spread it out down the wing. They carried all the way up to the try line, and it was eventually the one. Freddie Stewart was the boy who finishes that off. Marcus Smith managed to get a way more difficult kick than the one that he missed previously, drawing England back up to 18 points compared to New Zealand's 25. And the run of the game just feels different. New Zealand feel like they're in panic stations now. They're still a man down, trying to sort themselves out. England have got some momentum behind them. The crowd in Twickenham beginning to lift up. And it was in the 79th minute that England managed to salvage this game. Another try coming in from Stewart. He's not been on long, but 2 tries for him today. England on the charge again. The New Zealand defence looked a little bit tight. I think they were just maybe fatiguing. They've been on the defence for longer in this game than England were. And that sort of came across in that visits to the 22. I think New Zealand, although the scoreboard was much more in their favour, it seemed to me that they were sort of breaking away and scoring points, as opposed to that they were actually being the ones on the aggressive attack for the majority of this game. So defensively fatiguing, kicking in. There's only so many jackals you can rely on Ardie Savea making. New Zealand defence a little bit tight, and England managed to spread it down. Big meters going out to the wing, and it was passed back inside on a crash ball for a couple of big men going over, and it was Stewart that was the final man on the crash ball. Successfully converted by Marcus Smith. England 25, New Zealand 25. We get to the kickoff in the 80th minute. England recover, it goes to Marcus Smith, and he just kicks it out. I thought that was such a shame. Why do you not see how this game goes? I understand you're at home, you've managed to come back from a massive deficit. Oh man, if you make a comeback like that though, I feel like you've got to play that game out. I feel like whether win or lose, you play that game out. Give the fans the show that you're there. The momentum was behind you. New Zealand have still got their yellow card. I really feel like you play on there. I feel like it's a bit, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of just kicking the ball out and be like, oh, well, we'll take a draw. It's like, no, in terms of like world rankings and stuff, okay, maybe it means something. We've got the World Cup coming up. You want to have maybe bragging rights going in towards that World Cup. I would have liked to have seen that game came on, and make sure you guys do drop down in the comments what you think about that ending. I thought that was a real shame. I just would have liked to have seen it gone either way. Maybe it's because I'm a neutral. Maybe if you're an England or a New Zealand supporter, maybe you see it differently. As a neutral, I was like, oh man, I just wish that carried on. In terms of the full-time result then, 25-25, another draw for this team. They have had draws in the past, which is quite incredible. The final stats then, possession 56 to New Zealand, 44 to England. Didn't feel like that at the end of the second half, to be fair. It definitely feels like in that final 10 minutes, England must have had nearly entirely all of the possession, but obviously New Zealand had a lot more throughout the game. Number of turnovers, 11 to England, 14 to New Zealand, and those 14 coming at some real clinching times. I think about 5 or 6 turnover penalties came on the try line of New Zealand, which was, really good defence from a couple of the New Zealand players in that breakdown zone. And then finally, number of penalties, 14 all. Now, when you think about penalties, you've got here 1 from Barrett, and 1 from Fowler and 1 from Smith. England definitely turned down 4 kickable. I wasn't really keeping track of how many were kickable for New Zealand. When they go about 16 points up, it's not really something I'm paying attention to that much when I'm watching the game. But, missed kicks in this game from both sides. Penalty, 3 points not taken. How important was that drop goal for New Zealand not to have lost this game? That would have been a big news story on Monday had England managed to come back and steal this game. But it ends as a draw, guys. Make sure you drop down in the comments your thoughts on this game, no matter who you support. Keep it friendly, but make sure you do drop down your thoughts, because I always enjoy having a read through them. If you enjoyed this one today, remember to leave it a like and subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with all the latest videos as they come out. I'll see you all next time, guys. Bye-bye.